bride slapped a server at her wedding, without realizing the woman was her future mother-in-law. It was supposed to be the most beautiful day of her life, the kind of day that little girls dream about and grown women spend months planning for. The grand ballroom glowed beneath thousands of tiny crystal lights, and the scent of fresh white roses filled the air. Every guest whispered about how magnificent the decorations were and how stunning the bride looked in her diamond-studded gown. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, her chin lifted with pride, certain that she was the queen of the evening. She had spent weeks ensuring every detail was perfect, from the imported champagne to the designer table settings. Nothing could go wrong, at least not until one of the servers accidentally brushed against her dress. The woman was older, perhaps in her late 50s, dressed in a simple black uniform carrying a tray of wine glasses with shaking hands. The glass almost tipped, and a single drop of red wine splashed near Vanessa's gown. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Vanessa's eyes narrowed with fury. Without a moment of hesitation, she turned toward the woman and hissed, "Are you blind?" The server bowed her head in apology, her voice soft and trembling as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, ma'am." That should have been the end of it. But Vanessa's pride couldn't stand the idea of being embarrassed in front of her guests. She glared at the woman again, her heart pounding with anger, as if the entire event had been ruined by one tiny mistake. Moments later, as the music played and laughter returned to the room, Vanessa noticed the same server again. The woman was quietly placing glasses on the main table, her hands still shaking, her face lined with exhaustion but filled with kindness. To Vanessa, that tremble looked like weakness, and weakness disgusted her. Without thinking, she stormed over, snatched the tray from the woman's hands, and in front of everyone raised her palm and slapped her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. The music stopped. Guests froze mid-conversation, their eyes wide with disbelief. The woman didn't retaliate. She simply stood there, her cheek turning red, her expression calm but deeply wounded. Vanessa lifted her chin, declaring coldly, "Get her out of here." Security hesitated, but she glared at them until they moved. The woman was gently escorted away, still silent, while whispers filled the air like poison. Daniel, the groom, rushed to his bride's side, confused and horrified, asking what had happened. Vanessa simply waved him off, saying, "She ruined my dress. I can't have incompetence at my wedding." As the guests tried to resume the celebration, the energy in the room had changed. Some people shook their heads, others quietly left. Outside, the older woman stood by the garden, tears welling in her eyes but refusing to fall. She removed her apron, folded it neatly, and stared at the glittering hall beyond the glass doors. She glanced down at her finger, where a simple golden ring glimmered faintly in the moonlight, the same ring she had worn since her husband's passing. That ring carried a name, a story, and a connection that Vanessa had no idea about, because the woman she had just humiliated in front of hundreds wasn't a random worker or hired staff. She was someone Daniel knew, someone he loved more than anyone else in the world. Vanessa had just slapped the one person she should have shown the greatest respect to, and soon she would realize that her single act of arrogance had set off a chain of consequences that no apology could undo. As the night went on, the wedding celebration seemed to regain its rhythm, but beneath the glittering lights and joyful music, something felt strangely off. Daniel's mother had not arrived, and her absence weighed heavily on him. He checked his phone again and again, hoping for a message or a call. She had promised to be there early, yet her number now went straight to voicemail. Guests began whispering about how odd it was for the groom's mother to miss her only son's wedding. Daniel tried to push the thought away, forcing a smile as he danced with Vanessa, but deep down, unease gnawed at him. He loved her, but he couldn't ignore the way she had treated people that night. The arrogance, the tone, the superiority that seemed to follow her every word. Still, he told himself it was stress, that every bride got overwhelmed. But if his mother were there, she would have seen it all differently. Outside, under the soft glow of the garden lights, the older woman sat quietly in her car. Her name was Margaret, a woman of wisdom, strength, and gentle dignity. For years, she had been both mother and father to Daniel after his father passed away. She had taught him that kindness was a person's greatest beauty, and humility was the mark of true grace. Tonight, she had come earlier than anyone expected, planning to surprise her son by helping out with the preparations. She didn't tell Daniel or anyone else because she wanted to observe, to see the woman he loved in her most natural state. Not the version people show when they know they're being watched. When the catering manager recognized her as Daniel's mother, she politely asked to work quietly among the staff. "I just want to see how she treats those who serve her," she said softly, smiling. But what she witnessed broke her heart. The slap still burned on her cheek, not for the pain it caused, but for what it revealed. The woman who was about to become her daughter-in-law had publicly humiliated her without a second thought. She sat in silence now, tears welling in her eyes, whispering to herself, "Daniel deserves better." Her hands trembled as she removed her apron and looked at the wedding hall in the distance. The laughter and music continued as if nothing had happened, but Margaret knew this night would change everything. Inside, Vanessa twirled on the dance floor, her laughter echoing across the hall. She thought the incident with the server was long forgotten, just another moment where she had asserted her power. She had no idea that the woman she struck was the very person whose approval she needed the most. When a nervous caterer approached her and said someone wanted to speak with her outside, she rolled her eyes in annoyance. "Can't they see I'm busy?" she muttered, walking out in irritation. But the garden was empty. All that remained on the table was a folded apron and a silver name tag that read, Margaret. In that instant, a chill ran down her spine. She didn't yet know that Daniel's phone was about to ring, and the truth behind that slap was about to turn her perfect wedding into a nightmare she would never forget. Daniel stepped outside, confusion clouding his face as his phone buzzed in his pocket. When he looked at the screen, his heart nearly stopped. It was a message from his mother. His hands trembled as he opened it, and the words hit him like a thunderbolt. "Son, I came early to meet your bride. I helped the staff to see what kind of woman she really is. I was humiliated and slapped in front of everyone. Don't come looking for me until you know who you're marrying." For a long moment, Daniel stood frozen, unable to breathe. The laughter from inside the hall felt distant now, echoing like a cruel joke. His chest tightened as pieces of the evening began to make sense. The missing mother, the strange looks from guests, and Vanessa's smug smile after the so-called incident. Slowly, fury rose inside him. He turned on his heel and walked back into the grand hall, each step heavier than the last. When Vanessa saw him approaching, she smiled, assuming he had come to dance. But the expression on his face was cold, unfamiliar. He stopped in front of her, his voice low and trembling with anger. "Did you slap one of the servers tonight?" he asked. Vanessa blinked in surprise, confused by his tone. "Oh, that?" she said with a laugh. "Please, Daniel, she was just some clumsy old woman. She almost ruined my dress." Her laughter faded when she saw his eyes, sharp, unblinking, and filled with disappointment. The music faded again as guests noticed the tension. Daniel's next words sliced through the silence. "That clumsy old woman was my mother." The color drained from Vanessa's face. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. A gasp spread through the hall as people turned to stare at her. The weight of his words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Daniel continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She came early because she wanted to meet you. She wanted to see the woman I was about to marry. She worked with the staff to see your true heart. And you slapped her in front of everyone." Vanessa shook her head in disbelief, her voice trembling. I didn't know. She never said who she was." Daniel looked at her with cold clarity. "You don't have to know someone's name to treat them with respect. You don't slap people just because you think they're beneath you." A deep hush filled the room. Guests exchanged looks of shock and discomfort, some whispering, some recording the moment with their phones. Vanessa's father tried to intervene, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder, but Daniel stepped back. "No," he said firmly, his voice steady now. "This wedding is over." He pulled the wedding ring from his pocket, stared at it for a moment, and then set it gently on the table. The small metallic sound of the ring hitting the glass echoed louder than any music could. Vanessa reached for him, tears in her eyes, but he turned away. Without another word, Daniel walked toward the exit, leaving behind the glittering hall, the murmuring guests, and a bride whose fairy tale had turned into a nightmare in the space of a single slap. The next morning, the story exploded across every corner of social media. Videos of the wedding incident flooded the internet under one viral headline: "Bride slaps server at her own wedding," not realizing it was her mother-in-law. Within hours, millions of people had seen the clip. The video showed the moment Vanessa's hand struck the older woman's face, the collective gasp from the guests, and Daniel's confrontation that followed. Comment sections overflowed with outrage. People called Vanessa heartless, arrogant, and ungrateful. Some said it was karma. Others said it was a lesson she would never forget. Vanessa woke up to hundreds of missed calls, her name trending for all the wrong reasons. She tried to post an apology, but it only made things worse. No one believed her words. Brands that once offered her sponsorships dropped her within a day. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be seen with the woman everyone now hated. Her perfect image, the one she had spent years building, crumbled overnight. Meanwhile, Daniel drove for hours in silence, his mind still replaying the moment he read his mother's message. He couldn't believe what had happened. When he finally reached his mother's small countryside home, the sight of her standing by the garden nearly brought him to tears. Margaret turned and their eyes met. Without a word, Daniel walked to her and pulled her into an embrace. "You didn't deserve that," he whispered, his voice shaking. She smiled gently, brushing his cheek with her hand. "It's all right, son. Sometimes life reveals the truth at the right moment." Her calmness only deepened his guilt, but it also reminded him of what real strength looked like. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel promised himself he would never allow pride or status to blind him again. Weeks turned into months. Daniel spent more time with his mother, helping her run her small community center for the homeless and elderly. The experience changed him. He began to see kindness in places he had once overlooked and learned that love had little to do with appearances or wealth. People who once envied his relationship with Vanessa now admired the quiet strength he had found in humility. On the other hand, Vanessa's world fell apart piece by piece. Her expensive apartment lease ended when she could no longer afford it. Her friends stopped answering her calls, and invitations to glamorous events vanished. Each time she looked at her wedding photos, she could no longer see the beauty or the sparkle, only the frozen moment of her raised hand, the look of shock on her guests' faces, and the truth written all over Daniel's eyes. In the end, that single act of arrogance became her greatest downfall. But for Daniel and his mother, it was a painful blessing. The wedding that had begun as a show of luxury and perfection became a lasting reminder that respect cannot be bought, and love without humility will always collapse under the weight of pride.